This is Common Fact Sample 4 to beat IRS levies and IRS levy threats. It deals with IRS substitute returns. Common Fact Sample 4 addresses circumstances that have grown out of control. It deals with circumstances where the IRS has filed income tax returns for a taxpayer because the taxpayer didn't file them on his or her own. And when that happens, and as you can predict at gut level, the IRS is only going to include information on the return that essentially benefits it. And it won't include all the specifics on the return that would benefit a taxpayer. So, in the long run, that means that the amount that's demanded is, in all probability, far higher than the amount actually owed by the taxpayer. But first, let's recognize how common this circumstance is. In periods of disruption, especially financial disruption nationwide, many people will do what is needed to try to keep income coming in the front door. Month after month, they take odd jobs and they work quite commonly as independent contractors. And at the end of the year, there isn't enough withheld or paid in by them as estimated taxes to cover their tax responsibility. Many times over, for particularly distressed individuals and families, they'll work as independent contractors just trying to keep their bills paid and the family's bills paid. And as time goes on, they don't file tax returns. They get behind, and that prevents them from being able psychologically to address the reality that they had other tax returns that are already delinquent, and so they don't file the tax return that is due that year either. And they continue on like that for a period. Eventually, the IRS that receives its copies of the financial disclosures from the different folks or businesses that had paid the taxpayer, it will file income tax returns for the taxpayer, and those are referred to as substitute returns. Many times over, the taxpayer simply just has to file tax returns on his own, has to turn to a preparer, pay what is necessary to catch up, to prepare and file all the tax returns that hadn't been filed up till then. The key here is that if you pay no attention to the substitute returns and you don't pay any attention to the demands, eventually the IRS is going to threaten to levy, and if you pay no attention to that, the IRS will levy. The terrible destructive feature of substitute returns and inattentive taxpayers is the fact that the levies that issue are going to be attempting to collect the amounts that the IRS says are due and are probably terribly inflated compared to the amount that is actually owed by the taxpayer. Because again, the substitute returns won't take into account all of the things that are appropriate as deductions and exemptions that the taxpayer has coming rightfully to him or to her or to the family. And it's the family that's usually the critically injured party to all of this. Now, you also need to hear that in my practice of over 33 years, I have seen many situations where substitute returns were filed by the IRS and where huge amounts of money were demanded as being delinquent taxes. But when all the tax returns were actually prepared and filed, the taxpayer had refunds coming for those years. Refunds. So it wasn't a situation where something was owed at all. The taxpayers would have had refunds, child care credits, benefits would have been paid by the government to the family. And unfortunately, because of the rule relating that refunds are only good for a limited period of time, after returns go delinquent, sometimes refunds are not going to be paid because they're just simply too old. But the point is, in that situation, you go from a situation where a taxpayer is said to owe money to a situation where the taxpayer is owed money. And if the taxpayer remains inattentive and doesn't address, defend, file those returns, and avoid the threat to the levy, the outcome is extraordinarily destructive. So the key is, if substitute returns have been filed for those years, prepare proper returns and file them. If you have unfiled returns before substitute returns are filed, prepare and file proper returns for the years that you have unfiled delinquent returns. Thank you. And that concludes Common Fact Sample 4, to beat IRS levies and IRS levy threats, as it relates to IRS substitute returns and your rights to avoid unnecessary levies and unnecessary heavy-handed collection activity by the IRS.